We'll start with a brief summary of the interlopers. Ulrich patrols his territory in the forest of the Eastern Carpathians during a storm. His grandfather had obtained the legal rights to the land long ago. It was taken from the family of his rival George, but they've never accepted the ruling. They've been feuding for 3 generations. Ulrich is out with his men, keeping watch for George and any of his men. Ulrich leaves his men on a hill to walk down into the undergrowth. As he steps around a huge tree, he comes face to face with George. They glare at each other, but neither one fires his rifle. Before either one can act, the storm sends a huge, massive beech tree down on them. Ulrich is pinned under the tree with slashes on his face. George is pinned helplessly near him with similar injuries. Each is glad at the other's misfortune. They both threaten to leave the other behind, but neither is confident his men will arrive first. They stop struggling to escape. Ulrich manages to get a drink from his flask. Ulrich is moved with pity by George's pain and offers him a drink, but George refuses. As he lies helplessly, Ulrich's hatred for his longtime enemy wanes. He tells George that if his men arrive first, they will help him. They've been fools to quarrel so long. He asks George to be his friend. George talks about how shocked people would be to see them interact as friends. They could visit each other on special days and hunt as invited guests on each other's land. He accepts the offer of friendship. They both want to be the first to show goodwill to the other. Ulrich suggests they shout for help. They make 2 attempts without getting any response. Several minutes later, Ulrich sees figures moving through the woods, so they yell again. The figures run toward them. There are about 9 or 10 approaching, which makes George think they're Ulrich's men because he had fewer people in his group. The figures approach quickly. George anxiously asks for confirmation that they're Ulrich's men. Ulrich says no and utters a fearful laugh. George again asks who they are. Ulrich says they're wolves. That concludes the summary. Now we'll consider the theme of man versus nature. The ostensible conflict in the story is between humans, but the real opponents turn out to be humans in nature. When Ulrich and George come face to face, a fierce shriek of the storm breaks off a huge piece of a beech tree, which falls on them. They're pinned helplessly and suffer fractures and slashed faces. This occurred during their hesitation to shoot each other because the code of a restraining civilization prevented them. Nature doesn't have any qualms about killing. Human lives are completely irrelevant. A similar contrast is seen when Ulrich feels pity for his rival and offers his flask. Nature feels no pity for their plight. Their groans of pain sound out in vain in the wilderness. Ulrich and George also suffer from the cold, although not as much as they could have because it's an unusually warm winter. While stuck, their frailty is evident in another way. They try yelling for help, which they can only do when the wind dies down. The forest is vast, though, and their cries don't reach either of their groups. Human ears aren't sensitive enough to pick up the sound, unlike the superior ears of the wolves. The twist ending gives nature the final victory in this conflict. Ulrich and George were victorious at other times, trespassing in nature without permission and killing its denizens. But they can't do that anymore. The wolves rushing to the pinned men won't feel pity or a restraining moral code. They'll finish this conflict without hesitation. Now for a question. Who are the interlopers? An interloper is one who encroaches on the rights of another or an intruder. There are several interlopers mentioned and implied in the story. Of course, Ulrich and George each view the other as an interloper. Ulrich has the legal right to the land, which makes George an interloper whenever he poaches on it. George doesn't accept the court's judgment and thus views Ulrich as the interloper. Both men view the authorities as interlopers as well. While patrolling his land, Ulrich wants to come across George man to man with none to witness. He wants to settle the feud with violence without the authorities judging him for it. As far as he's concerned, the quarrel is between them and they'll handle it themselves. George feels the same way. After they both threaten to make sure the other dies under the fallen tree, George says, "We fight this quarrel out to the death, you and I and our foresters, with no cursed interlopers to come between us." He doesn't want any interference from the authorities either. He and Ulrich, and by extension their men, who are part of the in-group, will settle the matter. While they wanted privacy to handle the situation with violence, They ended up settling their feud in a much more productive way. Man to man, they were able to recognize the futility of their behavior and reconcile without any outside pressure. The twist ending reveals unexpected interlopers, the wolves. They aren't intruding on the land, of course, but they're intruding on the men's business with each other. After their triumph of understanding, with rescuers on the way, and everything resolved seemingly on their terms, the most unforgiving interlopers, wolves, destroy all the progress the former rivals have made. Finally, Ulrich and George are revealed as the ultimate interlopers. They're the intruders in the forest, the real outsiders. They've been feuding over its ownership, but the forest belongs to nature, of which the wolves are a part. I hope this look at the interlopers was helpful. Please subscribe for more literary commentary.
Oh, this is too easy. Let's go help, guys.